Hi everyone, I'm Kate and this is Karla, your trends experts at Boxclever. Welcome to our new Soapbox podcast series revisiting our cost of living trends report. Today we are exploring the trend trusted transactions, and this is all about how consumers are demanding transparency in a cost of living crisis.
And today we're joined by Tom and Sara, who are both research directors at Boxclever. So thank you very much for joining us. And to kick off, we wanted to ask you how you've seen the trend of trusted transactions play out across the real world.
I think one of the things that we've seen is quite a lot of service-based brands who seem to be trying to sort of play in this space. So a lot of kind of examples across utilities, financial services, telco, for example. If we take energy as a bit of an example, obviously from a contextual point of view in terms of this trend, energy is obviously as a utility is quite a fundamental kind of need for consumers, but at the same time, it's quite the needs from an energy supplier are quite simple. But there's been quite a lot of negative PR within the energy sector over the last few years. So I'm sure everyone remembers the well-publicised profiteering that happened at the start of the energy crisis, and the big six providers, I think, made around £3 billion in profit while people were struggling to pay their bills and keep their houses warm for their families. More recently as well, we've had examples like OVO, who I think well publicised in terms of having overcharging customers. And Ofgem have actually put measures in place, I believe, to help them to improve their complaints handling as well. So
Yeah, I got stung by OVO.
Did you?
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't been a customer with them since 2019 and they just kept sending me comms asking for money. Oh. Yeah, anyway.
Yeah. So I think it is a real demonstration within that sector of that eroded trust within brands and the sector overall. So one of the brands that we've seen, I think, successfully dialing into this trend within energy is Octopus Energy. There's a few different things in terms of kind of why I think they've successfully dialed into it. But firstly, the proposition is just really simple and focused, so it makes it quite sort of memorable from that point of view. There's nothing really superfluous about it. They don't have any kind of promotions or different mechanics kind of beyond their core offer. I think that's reflected in their messaging as well. So their messaging, I'm sure you will have heard the radio adverts, but it's all about award-winning customer services at fair prices. So it's totally all about long-term value. Everything that they talk about within their communications is about that long-term value. And I think from a sort of playing that back into the trend, I think that resonates strongly because people are really looking for that longer term certainty from brands. So caring less about the bells and whistles maybe, and I just want some certainty about the core service that I'm getting and how much I'm going to be paying for it.
Yeah, we've definitely heard that from Karla.
Yeah, that's so interesting because I think when you speak to customers, you always hear Octopus come up as a company that's really trusted, and to be in a sector that's so untrusted, but to be kind of getting that trust from customers, they're obviously really delivering on that message.
Yeah, it's got a lot of bad press, hasn't it? And the fact that you always remember those on the radio, don't they? Because it always comes from, the idea it's real customers, it's authentic. Yeah. You kind of have a little chuckle when you hear that it come up on the radio, but actually it does hit home as to what the message is and the story behind it.
Yeah, and I think part of the success as well is you'll see like every brand touch point on that acquisition journey. Radio seems to be a really key channel for them, but everything they talk about is backed up by external evidence. So they've got, I think, 7 years which recommended supplier. So they talk about that. They talk about consistently having the lowest prices of any of the big suppliers. So it's like everything they're talking about, they're kind of using external customer testimonials as well as a bit of a shortcut to kind of build that trust and that because they're relatively new, I think, within this space compared to some of the other players. So I think they've used that really well to build trust and credibility within the sector.
That point about certainty is really interesting as well, because we've been, in terms of tracking this trend, we've looked at obviously how that political uncertainty, financial uncertainty, societal uncertainty is putting consumers, in a sort of hot state of vigilance. They're really sort of having to understand, how how can they avoid not getting ripped off, basically. So I think that's really interesting about that long-term point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess uncertainty, it's that sense of trepidation, isn't it? Whereas actually a lot of what we're saying in this example is the fact it's tangible and, it's very black and white, it's very transparent.
Yeah.
And I think there's nowhere to hide for that, because it's just saying it exactly as it is. And that sense of transparency gives that sense of honesty and, eliminates that sense of uncertainty that we're saying people don't like about this trend.
It's like the anti-Ryanair.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think while the execution is maybe a little bit polarising, we had a quick look online at some of the dialogue that's happening. It's certainly memorable and cutting through. I think Octopus attracted about 700,000 new customers last year. So even if you don't like the execution, it's definitely been effective, I think, for Octopus.
Yeah, so it's definitely working for them. Have you seen any other examples, any other brands that are doing something similar?
Yeah, I think there's a number of interesting examples, particularly within that kind of service-based space. There's a lot of brands who seem to be playing into that real clear value-based messaging, quite functional delivery. One other one that sticks out is giffgaff, who I think in the face of a lot of mobile providers using in-contract RPI linked clauses to increase prices, I think there's been quite a lot of dissatisfaction. Certainly I felt that myself, with some of the big providers just kind of increasing it and it adding up to quite a lot. Whereas giffgaff, I think their proposition kind of lends itself well to this trend, but they have really lived up to that in terms of kind of holding prices for 18 months, I believe, on some of their SIM-only deals. So again, it's that kind of certainty and value coming together at a time when a lot of people are, quite focused on it.
giffgaff, we put that in the report as well, didn't we, around giffgaff. I think they, at the peak of cost of living, it was all about freezing prices there and then, to be really fair. And I think what you're saying now is that they've sort of continued in that, being really fair to consumers and obviously making it really clear what they offer, but obviously giving them the option to kind of lock in and have that certainty over a longer period of time, which is, a really good example.
I guess it's the idea of knowing where you stand as well, isn't it? Like being fair, but knowing exactly like what's what and being able to get a handle on it, getting that sense of control. Yeah,
because when everything is, all the prices are rising around you and you feel like you can't get a handle on it, those brands are going to feel like you're going to have a connection with them for that reason, like they were there for you, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's that message of we're on your side, we understand. It's something small, but, hopefully this helps.
Another theme that we were really interested in as part of this trend was around AI, I guess, the kind of rise of AI and how that is influencing the feeling that people don't know who to trust or what to trust. And obviously we're seeing lots more, fake, kind of deep fakes out there. And that's obviously adding to that feeling that consumers need to be extra vigilant. I think, Sarah, you had a really good example from a brand that's tackling
we do,
this.
because I think what we've been talking about so far is that the trend, can be quite functional, and that idea of knowing where you stand and being really transparent. And I guess we wanted to also bring to light some kind of examples of where we feel the trend is evolving from an emotional connection point of view. So, looking at people's like different brand values, different brand propositions, and putting those in the spotlight to see, how can we scrutinise, how can we sort of question people's relationship with brands and what does that mean for consumers. So one of the examples that we thought did that really well was Unilever and their latest campaign, the Dove Code, which we'll play at the end. And that really kind of strives to reflect AI within the beauty space and the impact of AI on beauty perceptions. And ultimately, I guess their campaign is all about how to reclaim the power of beauty on their terms within the world of the fact that AI can take it down a certain kind of perspective in a certain way. So a great example with this one is how they're really demonstrating that sense of authenticity by keeping their campaign committed and their brands really committed to real beauty rather than letting AI portray that real kind of sense of artificial reality of what our skin should look like, what our hair, what our makeup should look like, and ultimately our appearance. So the campaign is aimed to kind of make consumers feel really good about themselves and happy in their own skin, and showing us how to admire, respect, embrace the real life versions of ourselves through different ages, and not letting AI distort the perceptions of what that should mean within society, really, as both kind of as a whole, but also for us personally. So it really does kind of cleverly tackle that trend really of AI, and the fact that obviously AI, is all around us at the moment. People are really questioning, what does that mean with, can I trust it? What's really real? And it distorting that sense of reality. Like we see it all around us, don't we?
Yeah, and I think we'll come on to talk about this in a later episode around influencers, but we're seeing a rise of kind of, AI influencers now as well. And again, it's just feeding into that idea of what do consumers actually need and want, and in a time where they're obviously being very restricted with the cost of living, and as we move out the cost of living and there's more of a long tail, it's about who can I trust to where can I spend my money, and who can I trust as a brand. So I think that's going to be a big narrative going forward.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's it, whether it's, trust in AI, trust in ChatGPT, it is everywhere at the moment. I think it's just clouding people's judgments as to who are the real brands that I form that emotional connection with, who are the brands that I feel understand me and my values and how I want to feel from having a relationship with that brand. So I guess what Dove is trying to do is build that emotional connection and show that's their sense of transparency through that. So by doing that, they're kind of reinstilling that sense of trust, but also authenticity in obviously the master brand, but also then the specific brands within that and the specific products within that, by addressing that huge trend that we're seeing everywhere around us. And I guess, obviously, when we think about this, it is baked into the wider, huge campaign when looking at their campaign for real beauty. So it is all about honesty, transparency, and trust. It's really baked into their brand going back like 20 years. So, it's a real strong campaign that they've always had at the heart, but they're moving with the times and showing us, these are the new challenges that we're seeing with AI, and this is our view, and this is how we're being authentic and true to you, and why you can continue trusting us. So it feels a real natural territory for Dove to be moving into this. But I guess it's quite clever that they're also addressing what are the concerns that people have around us as well. So we're just now going to have a look at the ad and just reflect on everything we've just said, really.
Yep.
Come with me and you'll be in a world of pure imagination. Take a look and you'll see into your imagination. What we'll see will defy explanation. If you wanna view paradise, simply look around and view it. Anything you want to do it. Wanna change the world, there's nothing to it. There is no life I know to compare with your imagination. if you truly wish to be.
I think part of it is like, for me, and a nice link back to what you're saying about Dove is like, I feel like we should maybe point that more towards the fact that maybe brands who haven't been talking about this quite so much recently, like what is their permission to play in this, you know, how much can they stretch their brand? Is there a way for them to leverage what they've got already?
Because this trend is all about how a brand reacts to the negativity that is these like dodgy tactics that other brands, like whether it's like shrinkflation, greedflation, you know, locking people into higher tariffs, that type of stuff, like using AI to show something that they're not actually going to get, like that type of stuff. So it's a perfect example for that, isn't it? Because it's saying like, we won't do that.
What conversations have you been having with clients around this topic, or even with consumer conversations? What have you been hearing related to this trend?
Yeah, I think we're starting to see like clients and brands starting to ask like, what does this mean in our sector? What does this mean for us specifically? So, you know, we've always been asked by our clients and by brands, but I guess more so at the moment, like, how are we credible? Does our brand proposition demonstrate that sense of credibility? But we're often wanting to, and where we're seeing the shift is where clients wanting to be more specific and go beyond that now. So, you know, what does that sense of authenticity and fairness really mean in our sector? You know, how would our customers like us to demonstrate that sense of authenticity and transparency? You know, what impact will this have on trust on these brands specifically, and how can we be transparent? How can we reassure customers? How can we be fair? And I guess all those things, you know, when we link it back to our cost of living trends, where we started with all of this and thinking about, you know, the cost of living crisis generally, you know, they are key things from the cost of living that we know are really important, that sense of wanting to really take a handle on things and make sure that we are being in control and fair and transparent. And, you know, the brands and clients are really starting to look at their own, sort of reflect back on their own brands and think, okay, what does that mean with our brand values in mind and our brand proposition? Where are our strengths? Where do we need to evolve and kind of keep going with that? While still remaining true to who they are, I guess, as a brand.
I guess the challenge for brands, isn't it, is that because of the media, the way that they are perpetuating this idea that, you know, we're being ripped off by brands and everyone's struggling, but brands are profiteering from this, and the stories of, you know, shareholders getting paid out, you know, millions of pounds, whereas customers are kind of having to sort of foot the bill, really. I think that's the key headline that's coming through, isn't it? So with that in mind, like you're right, it's that challenge of how do we reassure consumers and make them trust us, but in an authentic way, because everyone now is just sort of on edge, really, and just almost taught by the media to not trust what anyone says. I
think, yeah, you're right. There's certainly, from some of the conversations I've had with some of our clients, there is just an element of fear of the unknown, because that people are calling brands out more and more regularly. So we quite often get asked about, how can we do this? How, you know, what permission do we have to stretch our brand into this place if it's not part of our core brand currently? And how can we do that without putting ourselves at risk of showing up on Reddit for, someone calling us out for not having the right sort of morals behind whatever we're trying to push in this space. Yeah, I think it's a big challenge for brands, I think. But I think the rewards in the longer term, because I think this trend's going to continue. So I think the rewards are there if you're kind of willing to put the work in.
I think Reddit, there's the shrinkflation subreddit, I think that's the right word, where people just like put in pictures of, like dairy milks that have shrunk by however many percent, or, there was 6 biscuits once and now there's 5 or 4 even. So I think that is just becoming more in the language of consumers day to day, and those conversations are really hotting up, and brands are being called out.
Yeah, even on Twitter or X, if someone sees something they're not happy with, they just share it, don't they? And then what you get as a pile-on because everyone has something to say about it. And I guess for brands, they want to avoid that completely.
Yeah, I think it's kind of evidence in that sense of trust, isn't it? You know, it's got to be like, okay, how do we be trusting? How do we demonstrate fairness? But how to do that in a tangible way as well. Like, what are you actually going to do as part of your proposition execution to show customers that that's what you're doing and not being fake about it? So I guess a Dove example works because, you know, they've been known to be doing that for the last 20 years, and all they're doing is evolving with that and just moving with the times. You know, if a brand suddenly tries to do something out of the blue, it's got to link back to kind of who they are and their brand persona and their values and their USP. And if it doesn't, I think even that will make customers sort of question it, make them be a bit suspicious. You know, it won't make them trust it as much if it's not authentic and genuine. So it's how to build on all of that and evolve it and stretch your brand proposition with, you know, keeping it genuine really as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, consumers can really spot inauthenticity, can't they?
Yeah, it's a hard job, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think there's that risk of just appearing tokenistic, isn't there? And that almost like the flip side of everything you're trying to do, that puts you more in that space of people not, you know, trusting your brand less. So that's why it is, I think, it's one to get right.
So thank you so much for sharing everything so far. It's been really interesting. We're going to wrap up now. So I'm going to ask you, what's the key takeaway from all this? Obviously, the trusted transactions trend. What's the key takeaway and implications for brands in 2024 and beyond from your perspective?
So I think there's an interesting point around the kind of going back to the earlier examples within energy, for example. I think the brands that can make quite a big impact in terms of the day-to-day spending that people have through just kind of really focusing on what that core value is and giving consumers certainty are probably going to win, and kind of, you know, that brand impact in the longer term is probably going to last for more with those brands that have really differentiated, I think, in some of these spaces.
Yeah, and I think it's got to be baked into the customer journey, hasn't it? It's got to be sincere. It's got to be long term. It can't be tokenistic. You know, it's got to show up through, you know, the core brand values really, to be authentic and simple and straightforward, but also long term. So, yeah, it needs to not avoid being tokenistic and be a real long term commitment. You know, this is the shift we're seeing, and it's about reacting to that and keeping with it and moving with that as it evolves even more.
Yeah, and I think we recognise obviously that a lot of the brands that we work with, they're corporate organisations. They've got a balance kind of what they can do for their customers with running a successful business. But I think it's, you know, where possible, even beyond what the core brand proposition is or how they deliver it. I think the brands that can really demonstrate that they live that even beyond. So going back to Octopus as the earlier example. For example, they use a lot of their profits. They reinvest a lot of that into renewable energy and supporting vulnerable customers as well. So I think that, you know, they've still made profit for their organisation. But
I hope so. We pay enough to them.
Exactly. But at the same time, they're not just they're walking the walk, I think, in terms of, you know, how they operate as a business. And I think, you know, again, if people are becoming more and more tuned into looking out for where companies perhaps aren't maybe making claims that they can't back up, I think having that knowledge that actually how you are operating as a business kind of reduces that worry about being scrutinised and that kind of damaging the brand as well.
I think that's a really good example, and it's almost the opposite of what we've seen, you know, with like water companies being in the media, for example, where they haven't necessarily, I mean, I'm not an expert in how it all works behind the scenes with water, so I'm not, you know, not saying that I am, but it's just in terms of that profit that we hear about in the media and that being paid out to shareholders, and then you find out that, you know, the water quality is not great in certain areas, and it's like, what, you know, should that not have been invested in that? And I know there's a whole kind of political conversation around that, but I guess it is in response to that. It's, what are you doing with that money? Are you doing something for good? Ultimately, that's going to benefit consumers in the long term for them to be able to trust you rather than just, going and lining the shareholders' pockets, essentially.
Yeah. And interesting that consumers are looking for the benefits for them and what it means for their situation, but also on that bigger level of, is it good for society as a whole? Is it good for other customers?
Well, thank you so much both. Thanks for coming in and chatting to us about our trusted transactions trend.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast episode. If you haven't downloaded it already, you can access our cost of living trends report by scanning the QR code on screen.
And if you'd like to speak to either of us or any of our guests about the trends that we've covered in the podcast, then please get in touch via the email address.
And that's everything from us. Thank you for listening.